Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So as always, tonight is a wedding night. So again, I'm here in another place. I'm a little bit tired, I must say. So we are in the Plexus day of the emotional week of Taurus. And the topic for today is literature. So some can say that literature is a part of poetry, which is indeed. But I separate it here because I guess that literature has something very different from poetry. While poetry is trying to transmit concepts, ideas in a very high level, literature is much more bounded to experiences, to try to explain the details of the things, to try to communicate the emotions, the details, the experiences of something, which take us to the idea of living that idea, living that something. So take action into that. So that's why it also takes us to try to live those stories. So we can understand the difference between poetry and literature, saying that poetry basically is like this spell, like this mantra that uses the words to manifest something concrete, and the way in which you can do that is because of the metric. The metric of the poetry is the one that has like this kind of mathematic way to describe, to tell, to expand the words. So we would use this metric, these systems, in order to manifest the words, the ideas. In the other hand, when we speak about literature, is very different, because literature is a narrative, and by narrative means that it has a story to tell. It's not about concepts, it's about a specific detailed story that uses the narrative as a way to explain the topics, the information. And it's written not like a poem, but as a prose. So this means that the way of writing this is free, that you don't have a metric to follow, that is constant, that is that it can be long and used in many different ways. So there is no a specific structure that you have to follow. Literature is free in order to explain every detail and be able to go and do anything. So let's go first to where this literature is born, and what is the things that gives us for our development. So the origin of literature would be in a different way of poetry, in which poetry was used as keywords to open doors in order to transmit information from the mind level into the matter, opening doors to new realities, sending messages of something that you are aiming to do. That was like a mantra. But instead of this, the literature was something much more common, because basically it was telling stories that had no specific goal but to help people to enjoy. And we can have these stories in fiction or as telling a real story, something that happened. We can explain this story from the past, the present, or the future. So as fiction, okay, or as a real story. And usually these stories were designed with teaching goals. Like in the very beginning, they were made in order to teach the young people how to solve some problems that the older ones had before. So in the ancient times, when the old ones used to share these stories, they used to sit in the around the fire, the home. They started to share with the younger ones the stories that they had lived. So what they usually did was to share their own experiences or the ones that someone told them, and they usually went to the past to start a story. Like, once upon a time, in a long time ago, something happened, and the context was this, and this was happening, and the people were like that, and we were living like this. So it makes an introduction, a beginning of a story that sets you in the environment, the specific, the special environment, so the people that listen to the story can be part of it. And once they are part of it, they introduce the conflict. So, and once happened this. So through the conflict, the people start to feel responsible for what is going on. So by sharing the conflict, they introduce possibilities of conflicts that they will live in their own lives. So the people can start to ask. They start to ask what happened with this one, or why they did this, or why they didn't do it in other way. So they start to question, to ask, and the story starts to have many branches that they can go from one side to another. And all of that information can take you to the resolution of the conflict. So all those branches took you to solve the problem. And the story, when the story was ended, there was this moral of a tale that they used to say that was the process of teaching. It was the moment when everyone understood how to solve a problem, and maybe to speak of different ways in which they would solve it in the future. This is a way of education. This was the way of sharing and transmitting information from one generation to another. So the narrative, telling stories, was the concept, the tool that helps us to keep all of us together, that makes us share these links, these bonds of a culture, that we can share information and we can be all one. So this is why it's related with the solar plexus, because the solar plexus is, this is me, this is my story, and I share it with all of you so you can keep transmitting the message for teaching process. So the narrative of these stories were very diverse according to the culture, but they usually started to have like kind of a order inside that is the trinity of literature. The trinity of literature is to having a beginning, a conflict, and an outcome. So these are the three parts of this story. And in we have different tools, like, for example, flashbacks that helps you understand things that happened before the beginning, flash forwards that helps you understand things that will come, and of course we have some things that we call the moral of the story. The moral of the story that will help the people that is listening to the story or reading the story to have some idea of how to solve their own problems. So as the time passed by, what we started to do was to develop the narrative in a better way, creating the literature. So literature started to be much more descriptive than poetry. Poetry was to describe the work, the job of the priests and priestesses in order to work within terms of the divine. So it was really difficult to get to understand by the people. It was very difficult to transmit the information of what the priests and priestesses had in the shape of poetry. So what the literature did was to download these concepts of poetry into very detailed stories so everyone could understand. Because there are so many interpretations for poetry, it doesn't matter if it's written there. Who read the poetry, they could understand many different ways and many different things from it. But in the narrative of the literature, it is precisely as it's written. It is describing precisely all the details of what it is expected to know. So this is why the narrative, the speaking stories, were designed in order to let the people know the stories of the gods, the stories of the ancestors, the stories of the heroes, so they could know their history, they could know what was happening. So one of the main goals that had literature besides poetry is that while poetry is describing concepts, literature is describing a story that is lived by someone. By someone. So there is a main character that doesn't have any face, that you only have his story. So you can feel that you are living that story as it's been told or as it's been written. So someone can basically feel that that person itself is living that story, that me, myself, can be also the character that is living that story. And that made a big difference in when literature started to evolve in our cultures, because it helped people to take action, to try to live the same story that they were reading. So throughout many centuries, these stories weren't able to be known by the common people because they had no idea how to read. So it was impossible for them to access to all this knowledge and all these stories. So, and even though even more in some cultures it was forbidden for people to know how to read. So lots of people, even a few centuries ago, most of the humanity was analphabet. So analphabetism was so huge in the population of humanity that we weren't able to get to all these stories. So in some cultures of Asia and Middle East, and mainly, of course, for us in Greece, there were some people dedicated to read these stories in public. They were sharing these stories and reading them so the people could know. So there were some places, specific places in public that people could go, sit and listen to this person telling the story. So these storytellers, basically what they also started to do, it was kind of acting the story so people could enjoy the read. So they were like trying to act the story. So in Greece, we had these spots, these places in public areas that that people used to go to see, places to see these other storytellers. So the place to see in Greek is called theatron. Theatron means a place to see. So people used to go to the theatron, which is the theater, to see those storytellers. So eventually, after all these times, we had to call that amphitheater because the Romans came and they put two theaters together, one in front of the other, so they can have more people around. So that's why from that time we call amphitheater the half of it. But in the time of Greece, it was always half. So it was called theater. So so from literature, when it started to evolve, we got theater. But that's why we can tell that it's kind of a different art, but actually theater is inside literature, because what the theater is doing is basically to act what is written on the literature. So literature and theater has been very important for us in our path of knowledge, of designing our way of thinking today, because the stories that literature brought to us kind of designed the way in which we interpret everything, our life. Since the very beginning that the structure of a story has been designed, we all have lived through these codes. Like, for example, if today we watch a movie from any hero, like from DC or from Marvel, what you will get, either if it is Batman or Spider-Man, you will have exactly the same structure in literature that the Greek people 2,000 years ago, more, 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, had designed for us to understand the path of the hero. The path of the hero was basically the main structure for every storytelling from the Greek time. And it was really important for all of us because all of us wanted to be like those heroes. So it worked perfectly because it matches our in our life. And this is why we started to accept these stories in our brain and normalize them inside till the time that we started to believe the character. I mean, to become your character and living those stories. So this literature of the hero was the most common and much more widely expanded in the world because these stories matches exactly our daily stories of our lives. We are struggling every day in order to achieve our goals, to solve problems. We have our antagonist in the stories, the bad guy and the good guy, and we are willing to solve the problem. So we know that we have a potential within that we don't know how to manage. So when we see these stories, we perfectly find ourselves in those stories, even if they are fantastic. We find ourselves struggling with our daily conflicts, and then we figure out a potential that we have within. And once we discover that, we can solve our problems and defeat our enemies. So that's why it's so easy for the people to accept this kind of literature, because it's the story that we would love to live, is the most closer to our own stories. So we have this kind of literature that is the most common, which is the path of the hero, that helps us to find a way of relate to our life, trying to live the story, that to say, I want to be that, I want to become that, because the common people are trying to solve problems in order to go into the next level, to feel that they are the heroes of the story. But commonly, the rest of the literature is descriptive, is the one that describes, is the one that tells a story, that it doesn't have a hero, that can tell other much more deeper concepts that are not strictly related to our life, to our common life. So this is why most of the people doesn't reach this kind of literature, because it's not exactly what they expect to live. The common people look for a specific kind of stories that are easy to get and easy to manifest in their brain. That's why the wider literature is so difficult for the people to get or to be spread in the society. So now literature has gave us something really important, which is stereotypes of characters. The main character of a story in literature are a package of attributes, of personalities that design in which we expect to be. So throughout all the history, all the stereotypes that were created in the stories were picked by people in order to try to live their lives according to those characters. And this is why a lot of people are living a life that they expect to live, but not the life that they really are. So this is why the exercise to change this concept of being others and start to be ourselves is to start to write our own story, to start to write who we really are and become the main character of that story. To write our beginning, to write our conflict, to write the resolution, the outcome. This is to write literally. And some people used to say, I don't know how to start to write it. And I will say, there's no right beginning, because there's no metric. There's no mathematics into literature. You can start writing just saying, today I went to buy the bread and it was 10 cents expensive. And just by that, you can write the bigger history. There's no line to write a story in literature. Someone can start by the end of the story, by something that happened, or just a simple fact, common fact. So the importance of writing our own story, the narrative of our own life, is in order to become aware of our own potential, of our own literature. And this means to be able to describe our future and to write our reality. And this sentence is very important because we are here to rewrite history. We are here to describe a new way to write history. So we have come here to rewrite the history. And by saying this, we can now understand that we have to write our history for it to happen. And to do that, we have to recognize that the word is creation. So we open our book, our writings, with a poem that opens the door. But after you open that door, you have to describe exactly what you are proposing, what you are expecting, what will happen. The details, the narrative of the future. And important to understand this, in literature, you will always have an outcome, but never an ending. It never ends. So my advice for you today is for you to write your story, for you to be able to write what you have within, what you have lived, and what you expect to live. And for that, it doesn't matter if it takes you 10 pages or 1,000 pages. It doesn't matter if you write it in just one weekend or in 5 years. It doesn't matter if you now can only put one sentence and maybe other day in 1 hour you make 5 pages, and maybe then in order to end the paragraph you will need 1 year. It doesn't matter. My advice is for you to have one book in white where you can say there or put there, this is my literal story. And every time that you have an idea, you write it down. And as I said before, there is no end on literature. So there is no goal on literature. So don't think on doing this for something. It's just telling a story without any goal. Eventually, someday, maybe for someone, that book can really change its life. And we wouldn't even know that. So it's just about telling a story. So I invite you to rediscover your inner potential of literature and to begin to rewrite the history. The vibration for today is Ria. The statement for today is, I am the guardian of the being. The quote for today is human. Within the Animalia kingdom, in the vertebrate branch, and within the hominid branch, the animal species of the human develops. Its name comes from the Latin humus, that means humid earth or mud. For according to all traditions, the human was made out of clay and mud. The big difference of the human kingdom compared with its evolutive tree is the cognitive development, the auto-reference, the creation of languages, cultures, laws, religion, government, science, and technology. The human kingdom is the symbol of highest development of thoughts of the earth. See, let's go to the alignment. Sit comfortable, close your eyes, and concentrate in your breathings. I become aware of the space around me, the body that I inhabit, and my own breathing. I use my imagination to make every object disappear in this room. Observe how everything vanished. And as I can see all of it disappear, I perceive also the walls, the roof, and the floor vanishing too, until only see void. In this void, I stare at one point, only one spot, where I put all my attention, where I set all focus and my energy. As I take a deep breath, I can't perceive how this spot turns spark, and the spark expands into many, and all of them create a fire. This fire starts to grow as I can perceive its light shining bright and its heat on my skin. I recognize that this fire is the essence of my soul, and from it I can build my home, the home of my dreams. With my hands, I take this fire and start to expand, like dancing slowly and softly into all directions, spreading the fire and designing my home, its walls, rooms, roof. I become aware that every room is a chakra, that the kitchen is the heart, the gardens are my projects, and every wall is a bone. I take a deep breath and I walk to the library of the house where all the books are found. I take one of the books and I sit down on a sofa in front of the fireplace, and I start to watch and read in between lines this book, where I can find written down the story of my whole life, everything that I have done to accomplish, to build this home. I go through my history and I recognize, as I see my story, the being that I am, guarded in this book. I am the guardian of this being, and only me is capable to tell its story. I picture myself telling my story to all those who are willing to hear it around this fire. I am guardian of the being. I am guardian of the being. I am guardian of the being. I have. I have. I have. I have this story, this narration in me. And so I begin. Once upon a time, I take a deep breath, taking the beginning of my story to my heart. And each one at its own time come back here and now. So those who are following the task in this month, pour all this energy into the water and then pour it in the plants that we have sowed. Thank you everybody for being here another day. And see you tomorrow at the same time.